Right. Let us continue with the Count of Monte Cristo. Chapter 67. The Crown Prosecutor's Office. Let us leave the banker's horses trotting smartly home with him, and follow Madame Danglars on her morning excursion. We said that at 12:30 she had called for her carriage and gone out. She set off towards the Faubourg Saint-Germain, went down the Rue Mazarine, and called for the driver to halt at the Passage du Pont-Neuf. Here she got down and crossed the street. She was very simply dressed, appropriately for a woman of taste at this time of day. At the Rue Genegot, she got into a cab and asked to be driven to the Rue de Harlay. No sooner was she inside the cab than she took a thick black veil out of her pocket and pinned it on her straw hat. Then she put the hat back on her head and was pleased to see, looking in her little pocket mirror, that only her white skin and the shining pupils of her eyes were visible. The cab drove across the Pont Neuf and through the Place Dauphine into the courtyard at Rue de Harlay. Madame Danglars paid the driver as he opened the door and swept towards the stairway, which she lightly mounted, soon reaching the Salle des Pas Perdus. In the morning there is lots of business and still more busy people in the Palais de Justice. Busy people do not bother much with women, so Madame Danglars crossed the Salle des Pas Perdus without attracting any more notice than 10 other women waiting to see their lawyers. There was a crowd in Monsieur de Villefort's antechamber, but Madame Danglars did not even have to mention his name. As soon as she appeared, an usher got up, came across to her, and asked whether she were not the person who had an appointment with the Crown Prosecutor. When she replied that she was, he led her along a private corridor into Monsieur de Villefort's study. The magistrate was sitting in his armchair, writing, with his back towards the door. He heard it open and the usher say, "This way, madame." Then the door close, all without moving. But as soon as he heard the usher's footsteps going away along the corridor, he leapt up, went to draw the curtains, lock the doors, and inspect every corner of the study. Only when his mind was at rest and he was certain of not being seen or heard did he say, "Madame, thank you for your punctuality." And he offered Madame Danglars a seat, which she accepted, because her heart was beating so hard that she felt as though she was suffocating. The Crown Prosecutor also sat down and turned his chair around to face Madame Danglars. "Madame," he said, "it is a long time since I had the pleasure of speaking to you alone, and I deeply regret that we should be meeting to discuss something so disagreeable. Despite that, monsieur, you see that I have come as soon as you asked, even though the topic must be still more disagreeable for me than for you." Villefort gave a bitter smile, and said, in response more to his own thoughts than to Madame Danglars' words, "So it is true that every one of our actions leaves some trace on our past, either dark or bright. So it is true that every step we take is more like a reptile's progress across the sand, leaving a track behind it. And often, alas, the track is the mark of our tears." "Monsieur," said Madame Danglars, "you must understand my feelings. I beg you to spare me as much as possible. This room, through which so many guilty men and women have passed, trembling and ashamed, this chair on which I, in my turn, sit trembling and ashamed, it takes all the strength of my reason to persuade me that I am not a guilty woman and you a threatening judge." Villefort shook his head and sighed. "I tell myself that my place is not on the judge's bench, but in the dock with the accused." "You?" Madame Danglars said in astonishment. "Yes, I." "I think that, so far as you are concerned, monsieur," said Madame Danglars, her lovely eyes briefly lighting up, "you are over-scrupulous and exaggerating the situation. The tracks that you mentioned have been made by all hot-blooded youths. Beneath passion and beyond pleasure there is always a trace of remorse. That is why the gospel, that everlasting succour to the unfortunate, has given us poor women as a prop the excellent parable of the sinner and the woman taken in adultery. So, when I consider the follies of my youth, I sometimes think that God will forgive them, because some compensation for them, though not an excuse, is to be found in my sufferings. But what do you have to fear from all this, you men whom everyone excuses and who are elevated by scandal? Madame, Villefort replied, you know me. I am not a hypocrite. Or, at least, I never dissemble without some purpose. My brow may be forbidding, but that is because it is darkened by many misfortunes. My heart may be stone, but it needs must be to withstand the blows that have assailed it. I was not like this in my youth. I was not like this at the betrothal feast in Marseille when we all sat at a table in the Rue de Cour. Since then, much has changed, both around me and within me. My life has been worn away in the pursuit of difficult things, and in breaking down those who, voluntarily or otherwise, of their own free will or as a result of chance, stood in my way and raised such obstacles. It is rare to feel an ardent desire for something and not find that it is ardently defended by those from whom one would like to take it or seize it. So, most ill deeds present themselves to their perpetrators in the specious guise of a necessity. Then, when the deed has been committed, in a moment of passion, fear, or delirium, one realizes that it might have been avoided. Blind as you were, you did not see the correct course of action, which now appears plainly and simply before you. You think, how can I have done that instead of this? You ladies, on the other hand, are rarely tormented by remorse, because the decision rarely comes from you. Your misfortunes are almost always imposed on you, and your errors almost always another's crime. In any event, monsieur, you must agree, Madame Danglars replied. If I did make a mistake, I was severely punished for it yesterday. Poor woman, said Villefort, pressing her hand. Too severely, since your strength twice nearly gave way, and yet— Well? Well, I must tell you. Be brave, madame. We are not yet at an end. My God! Madame Danglars exclaimed in terror. What is there still to come? You can see only the past, and it is grim, I confess. But imagine a still grimmer future. A future that is sure to be frightful, and perhaps stained with blood. The Baroness knew Villefort's usual restraint, and was so horrified by this lurid outburst that she opened her mouth to scream, but the cry was stifled in her throat. How has this terrible past been resurrected? Villefort asked. How has it arisen from its sleep in the depths of the tomb and the depths of our hearts, like a ghost draining the blood from our cheeks and making the pulse beat in our temples? Alas, said Hermine, by chance, no doubt. Chance? Said Villefort. No, no, madame, there is no chance. Of course there is. Was it not chance, admittedly a fatal one, but chance none the less that was behind all this? Was it not chance that the Count of Monte Cristo bought that house, that he had the earth dug, and finally that the unhappy child was dug up from under the trees, that poor innocent creature, flesh of my flesh, to whom I never gave a kiss, but only tears? Oh, my heart fluttered when I heard the Count speak of those cherished remains that were found among the flowers. And yet it is not so, madame. This is the frightful thing that I must tell you, Villefort replied in a stifled voice. There were no remains discovered among the flowers, no child unearthed. No, you should not be weeping, you should not moan, you should be trembling with fear. What can you mean? Madame Danglars exclaimed with a shudder. I mean that Monsieur Monte Cristo, had he dug under those trees, would not have found either a child's skeleton or the iron of a box, because neither was there to be found." "Neither was there?" Madame Danglars repeated, looking at the prosecutor with eyes of sheer terror, their pupils horribly dilated. Then, like someone trying, in the sound of the words or the voice, to grasp an idea that is about to elude them, she repeated, "Neither was there." "No," said Villefort, burying his face in his hands. 100 times no. "But was it not there that you put the poor child, monsieur? Why deceive me? Tell me, why should you want to do such a thing?" "It was there. But listen to me, madame. Hear me out, and you will sympathize with me. I who have borne for 20 years the burden of sorrow that I am about to tell you, without shuffling the smallest part of it off onto you." "My God, you terrify me." "No matter, I am listening." "You know the events of that unhappy night when you lay gasping on your bed in that room with the red damask, while I waited for you to be delivered, almost as exhausted as you. The child came and was handed to me, motionless, not breathing or crying. We thought it was dead." Madame Danglars made a sudden movement, as though to leap from the chair, but Villefort stopped her, clasping his hands as though begging her to listen. "We thought he was dead," he repeated. "I put him in a box that would serve as a coffin, and went down to the garden, where I dug a grave and hastily buried it. I had just finished covering it with earth when the Corsican struck me. I saw a shape rise up in the flash of a blade. I felt a stab of pain and tried to cry out, but an icy shudder ran through my body and stifled the cry in my throat. I fell, dying. I thought I was dead. I shall never forget your sublime courage when, regaining my senses, I dragged myself with one final effort to the foot of the staircase where you, though you were yourself on the brink of death, came over to me. We had to hush up this awful catastrophe. You bravely returned home, supported by your nurse, while I used a duel as an excuse for my wound. Astonishingly, we both managed to keep the secret. I was carried to Versailles, and for 3 months fought against death. Finally, when I seemed to be over the worst, I was prescribed the son and heir of the south. 4 men carried me from Paris to Châlons at a rate of 6 leagues a day. Madame de Villefort followed the stretcher in her carriage. In Châlons, I was put on the Saône, then on the Rhône, and carried by the current I went down to Arles, where I once more took to my stretcher and continued to Marseille. My convalescence lasted 6 months. I heard nothing of you, and did not dare ask after you. When I returned to Paris, I learned that Monsieur de Narbonne had died, and you had married Monsieur Danglars. What had been constantly on my mind from the moment I regained consciousness? Always the same thing. The child's body, which every night in my dreams rose up out of the earth and hovered over the grave, threatening me with its look and gesture. So, no sooner had I returned to Paris than I asked about the house. It had not been inhabited since we left, but it had just been leased for 9 years. I went to find the tenant and pretended that I was most anxious that this house, which belonged to my wife's parents, should not fall into the hands of strangers. I offered them compensation in exchange for the lease. They asked for 6,000 francs. I would have given 10,000 or 20,000. I had the money on me there, and then got them to sign the papers. As soon as the lease was in my hands, I set off at a gallop for Auteuil. Since I had last been there, no one had entered the house. It was 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I went up to the Red Room and waited until nightfall. While I was waiting, everything that I had thought during the past agonizing year rose up in my mind, more threatening than ever. The Corsican who had declared a vendetta against me, who had followed me from Nîmes to Paris, who had hidden in the garden and struck me. This man had seen me dig the grave and bury the child. He might discover who you were. Perhaps he knew it already. Would he not one day make you pay for his silence in this terrible business? Would that not be sweet revenge for him when he learned that I had not died from my wound? So it was urgent for me, first and foremost, to get rid of all traces of the past and destroy any material evidence. The reality was clearly enough present in my mind. This is why I had bought the lease, why I had come here, why I was waiting. Night fell, and I waited until it was quite dark. I had no light in the room, and gusts of wind shook the doors, behind which I constantly thought I could see someone hiding. From time to time I shuddered, thinking that I could hear your groans behind me from the bed, and I dared not turn around to look. My heart beat so fast in the silence that I thought my wound would reopen. Then, finally, I heard all the noises of the country cease, one by one. I realized that I had nothing more to fear, that I could neither be seen nor heard, and I decided to go downstairs. Believe me, Hermine, I consider myself as brave as the next man, but when I went to the chain around my neck and took out the little key to the staircase, which was so dear to both of us and which you had attached to a gold ring, when I opened the door and saw a pale moon through the windows casting a long streak of light across the spiralling steps, I had to lean against the wall, and I almost cried out. I thought I was going mad. At last I managed to control myself. I went down step by step. The only thing that I was unable to master was a strange trembling in my knees. I clasped the stair rail. If I had let it go for a moment, I should have fallen. I reached the door at the bottom. Beyond it there was a spade leaning against the wall. I had a covered lantern and stopped in the middle of the lawn to light it, then went on. It was now the end of November, and all the greenery of the garden had vanished. The trees were nothing but skeletons with long bony arms, and the dead leaves crackled like the gravel under my feet. I was so terrified that as I came close to the bushes, I took a pistol out of my pocket and primed it. I still expected to see the Corsican emerging from among the branches. With the covered lantern, I lit up the cluster of bushes. There was no one there. I looked around and saw that I was indeed alone. No noise broke the silence of the night except the sharp, lugubrious cry of an owl calling up the ghosts of night. I hung the lantern on a forked branch that I had already noticed a year earlier at the very place where I had stopped to dig the grave. During the summer, the grass had grown thickly on the spot, and there had been no one there in the autumn to mow it. However, one place where the grass was thinner attracted my attention. This was clearly where I had dug the ground. I set to work. I had at last reached the moment I had been waiting for over a year. So, how I hoped, how I worked, and how I sounded out each tuft of grass, expecting to feel something solid beneath my spade. But nothing. Yet the hole I made was twice as large as the first. I thought I must have been wrong, and had mistaken the spot. I took my bearings, looked at the trees, tried to recognize the details that had struck me. A sharp, cold breeze was whining through the naked branches, yet my brow was covered in sweat. I remembered that the dagger had struck me just as I was stamping on the ground to cover the grave. As I did so, I leant against a laburnum tree, and behind me was an artificial rock intended to serve as a bench, because when I fell, my hand had gone from the laburnum to the cold of the stone. On my right was this same laburnum, and behind me the rock. I fell in the same way, got up, and began to dig again, enlarging the hole. Nothing. Still nothing. The box had vanished. The box had vanished, Madame Danglars muttered, barely able to speak for horror. Don't think that I left it at that, Villefort went on. No, I looked all around. I thought that the assassin might have dug the box up and, thinking it was a treasure, wanted to steal it and had carried it off, then, realizing his mistake, had dug another hole and put it inside. But no, nothing. Then I had the idea that he would not have taken such precautions, but purely and simply thrown the box away somewhere. If that was right, I would have to wait for daylight to look for it, so I went back up to the room and waited. Oh, my God! When daylight came, I went down again. I walked directly across to the shrubbery, hoping to find some sign that I might have missed in the darkness. I had dug the earth over an area of more than 20 square feet and to a depth of more than 2 feet. A hired labourer would have taken at least a day to do what I had done in an hour. Nothing. There was nothing to be seen. Consequently, I set about looking for the box, on my earlier assumption that it had been discarded somewhere. It would have to be on the path leading to the way out, but this new search was as fruitless as the first, and with a heavy heart I returned to the shrubbery, though I no longer had any hope even there. That was enough to drive you mad, Madame Danglars cried. I did hope as much for a time, said Villefort, but I did not have that good fortune. However, gathering my strength and my thoughts, I began to wonder why the man should have taken away a body. But you said it yourself, to have proof. No, madame, that could no longer be it. A person does not keep a corpse for a year. He shows it to a magistrate and makes a statement. But nothing like that had happened. So then what? Hermine asked, trembling all over. Then something more awful, more deadly and more terrifying for us, which is that the child may perhaps have been alive and the murderer saved it. Madame Danglars gave a fearful cry and grasped Villefort's hands. "My child was alive!" she said. "You buried my child alive! Monsieur, you were not sure that my child was dead, and yet you buried it! Ah!" She was now standing in almost a threatening way before the Crown Prosecutor, grasping his wrists in her delicate hands. "How can I tell? I am telling you this as I might anything else," Villefort replied, staring in a manner that suggested this powerful man was nearing the limits of madness and despair. "My child! Oh, my poor child!" the Baroness cried, collapsing back into her chair and stifling her sobs in a handkerchief. Villefort recovered his senses and realized that the maternal tempest gathering about his head could only be warded off by letting Madame Danglars share his own terror. He got up and went over to the Baroness so that he could whisper to her, "Don't you understand that if this is the case, we are lost? The child is alive, and someone knows he is alive. Someone shares our secret. And since Monte Cristo was speaking to us about a child dug up at the spot where that child vanished, then he is the one who shares our secret." "Oh, God! Just and vengeful God!" Madame Danglars muttered, to which Villefort replied only with a sort of roar. "But the child, monsieur, what about the child?" the mother asked obstinately. "Believe me, I have looked for him," Villefort said, wringing his hands. "How many times have I called him in the long, sleepless nights? How many times have I wanted a princely fortune to purchase 1,000,000 secrets from 1,000,000 men so that I might discover mine in theirs? So, finally, when a day came and I picked up the spade for the 100th time, I asked myself for the 100th time what the Corsican could have done with the child. A child is burdensome for a fugitive. Perhaps, seeing that it was still living, he threw it in the river." "Impossible!" Madame Danglars exclaimed. "One may murder a man for revenge, but not drown an infant in cold blood." "So, perhaps," Villefort went on, "he put it in the foundling hospital." "Yes, yes, monsieur, my child is there," the Baroness cried. "I went to the hospital and learned that very night, the 20th of September, a child was placed in the tower, wrapped in half a cloth of fine linen deliberately torn. This piece of cloth bore half a baron's coronet and the letter H." That's it!" Madame Danglars exclaimed. "All my linen has that mark. Monsieur de Nargonne was a baron, and my name is Hermine. Oh, God, thank you! My child did not die." "No, he didn't die." "And you can tell me this. You can tell me this without fearing that I shall die of happiness. Where is he? Where is my child?" Villefort shrugged his shoulders and said, "How do I know? Do you think that if I did I would lead you to the answer inch by inch, like a dramatist or a novelist? No, alas, I can't tell you. About 6 months before, a woman had come to claim that child with the other half of the cloth. She gave all the guarantees demanded by law, and they handed the child over to her." "But you should have inquired after this woman. You should have found her." "What do you think I did, madame? I pretended it was for a criminal investigation and put all the finest sleuths and cleverest bloodhounds in the police force to look for her. She was followed as far as Chalons. Then they lost trace of her." "Lost trace?" "Yes, lost. Lost forever." Madame Danglars had heaved a sigh, let fall a tear, or given a cry for every detail of this story. "Is that all?" she asked. "Did you stop there?" "Oh, no," said Villefort. "I have never stopped looking, inquiring, investigating, except that for the past 2 or 3 years I have relaxed my efforts slightly. From today I shall resume the hunt with more persistence and determination than ever, and I shall succeed, because it is no longer my conscience that drives me, it is fear." "But it seems to me that the Count of Monte Cristo can know nothing, or he would not seek our company in the way he does." "The wickedness of men runs very deep," said Villefort, "since it is deeper than the kindness of God. Did you notice the man's eyes while he was talking to us?" "No." "But have you ever looked closely at him?" "Of course. He is odd, that's all. I did, however, notice one thing, which is that throughout the whole of that exquisite meal which he gave us, he himself touched nothing from any dish." "Yes, I too noticed that. If I had known what I know now, I should not have eaten anything myself. I should have thought that he wanted to poison us." "But you would have been wrong, as you can see." "Certainly, but that man, believe me, has some other plans. This is why I wanted to see you, why I asked to speak to you, and why I wanted to warn you against everyone, but especially against him." "Tell me," he said, staring harder at the Baroness than ever, "have you mentioned our affair to anyone?" "Never, not a soul." "You will understand," Villefort said affectionately, "if I repeat, no one? Forgive me for insisting, no one in the world?" "Yes, I do fully understand," the Baroness said, blushing. "Never, I swear." "You don't write down every evening what has happened during the day? You don't keep a diary?" "No. Alas, my life is spent in frivolous trifles, which I even forget myself." "And as far as you know, you don't talk in your sleep?" "I sleep like a baby. Don't you remember?" The blood rushed to her face and out of Villefort's. "That's true," he said in a barely audible voice. "Well then?" asked the Baroness. "Well then, I know what has to be done. Within a week I shall know what this Monte Cristo is, where he comes from, where he is going, and why he tells us about children dug up from his garden." Villefort spoke these words in a tone of voice that would have made the Count shudder if he could have heard them. Then he shook the hand which the Baroness reluctantly gave him, and respectfully showed her to the door. Madame Danglars hailed another cab, which took her back to the passage, at the far end of which she found her own carriage and her coachman, who had been sleeping peacefully on his seat while waiting for her return. Chapter 68. A Summer Ball. The same day, at about the time when Madame Danglars was engaged, as we have seen, in the study of the Crown Prosecutor, a travelling coach drove into the Rue de Helder, through the gate of number 27 and into the courtyard, where it stopped. After a moment the door opened, and Madame de Morcerf stepped down, leaning on her son's arm. Hardly had Albert brought his mother home than he called for a bath, and then his horses. After allowing his valet to attend to him, he had himself driven to the Champs-Élysées, to the Count of Monte Cristo's. The Count greeted him with his usual smile. It was a strange thing. One never appeared to take a step forward in the heart or mind of this man. Those who wished, so to speak, to force their way into intimacy with him found the path blocked. Morcerf was running over to him with open arms, but, on seeing him, despite the Count's friendly smile, he let his arms fall and dared at most to offer his hand. The Count touched it, as he always did, but without shaking it. "Well, my dear Count, here I am," Morcerf said. "Welcome. I have just got back." "From Dieppe?" "From Le Tréport." "Oh, yes, that's right." "And you are the first person I have visited." "That's charming of you," said Monte Cristo as casually as he might have said anything. "Well then, what news?" "News? You are asking me, a foreigner, for news?" "When I ask for news, I mean, have you done anything for me?" "Did you give me some job to do?" the Count said, with a pretence of concern. "Come now," said Albert, "don't pretend not to care. They say that there are sympathetic warnings that cross distances. Well, in Le Tréport I had an electric shock. Even if you didn't do anything on my behalf, you did think of me." "That's possible," Monte Cristo said. "I did indeed think of you. But the magnetic current which I served to conduct was, I have to admit, generated independently of my will." "Really? Elucidate, I beg you." "Easy. Monsieur Danglars had dinner with me." "I know, because the reason my mother and I left Paris was to avoid him." "And he dined with Monsieur Andrea Cavalcanti." "Your Italian prince?" "Let's not exaggerate. Monsieur Andrea only awards himself the title of Viscount." "Awards himself?" "As you say." "So he isn't one?" "How do I know? He awards himself, I award him, they award him. Isn't that all the same as if he had it?" "Come now, you are behaving strangely. So then—" "Then what?" "Monsieur Danglars dined here." "Yes." "With your Viscount Andrea Cavalcanti?" "With Viscount Andrea Cavalcanti, his father the Marquis, Madame Danglars, Monsieur and Madame de Villefort, and some delightful people. Monsieur de Bray, Maximilien Morel, and who else? Wait, oh yes, Monsieur de Châteaurenard." "Was my name mentioned?" "Not once." "Too bad." "Why? I would have thought that in forgetting you they did only what you wanted." "My dear Count, if they didn't mention me, that means that they must have thought about me a lot, so I'm at my wit's end." "What does it matter, since Mademoiselle Danglars was not here among those who were thinking about you? True, she might have thought about you at home." "Oh, no, I'm quite sure of that. Or if she did, it was in the same way that I think of her." How charming, this meeting of minds. So you hate one another? Please don't misunderstand me, said Morcerf. If Mademoiselle Danglars were the sort of woman to sympathise with the torments I am not enduring on her behalf, and to recompense me outside the provisions of the marriage contract drawn up between our two families, I should be delighted with this arrangement. In short, I think Mademoiselle Danglars would make a charming mistress, but as a wife, good God! So that's how you envisage your future? Monte Cristo said with a laugh. Yes. When all's said and done, it is. Slightly brutal, I realise, but accurate. But since this dream can never come true, and since, for me to reach a particular goal, Mademoiselle Danglars must become my wife, that is to say, live with me, think beside me, sing near me, write verses, and make music a few yards away from me, and all this for the rest of my life, then I am appalled at the prospect. You can leave a mistress, Count, but a wife, that's a different matter entirely. A wife is for eternity, whether close by or at a distance. The idea of having Mademoiselle Danglars forever is terrifying, even at a distance. You're fussy, Viscount. Yes, because I dream of something impossible. Which is finding a wife for myself like the one my father found. The colour drained from Monte Cristo's cheeks, and he watched Albert while toying with some magnificent pistols, rapidly cocking them, then releasing the springs. So your father has been a happy man, he said. You know how I feel about my mother, Count. She is an angel, still beautiful, still witty, finer than ever. I have just come back from Le Tréport. Now, for any other son, just imagine, travelling with his mother would be an act of kindness or an unavoidable burden. Yet I have just spent 4 days with mine in Le Tréport, and I can tell you they were more satisfying, more relaxing, and more poetical than if I had been with Queen Mab or Titania. Anyone would despair of rivalling such perfection. You will make anyone who hears you wish seriously to remain a bachelor. Wish is precisely why, knowing that there is one accomplished woman in the world, I am not anxious to marry Mademoiselle Danglars. Have you noticed how our egoism paints everything that belongs to us in brilliant hues? The diamond that sparkled in the windows of Marle or Fossin becomes much lovelier once it is our diamond. But if circumstances force you to acknowledge that there is still a finer one, and you are condemned forever to wear this diamond which is inferior to the other, do you understand what torture that is? Snob, the Count muttered. And that is why I shall be jumping for joy on the day when Mademoiselle Eugène notices that I am only a puny little atom, possessing hardly as many hundreds of thousands of francs as she has millions. Monte Cristo smiled. I did have another idea, Albert went on. Franz likes odd things, so I tried to make him fall in love with Mademoiselle Danglars in spite of himself. I wrote him 4 letters in the most enticing of styles, but he always gave me the same answer. I may be eccentric, it's true, but my eccentricity does not extend to breaking my word once I have given it. Now, that's what I call true friendship, giving another person as wife the woman one only wants for oneself as a mistress. Albert smiled. Incidentally, he said, dear Franz is on his way home, but that doesn't bother you. You don't like him, do you? What? My dear Viscount, whatever told you that I don't like Monsieur Franz? I like everybody. I am included in everybody. Thank you. Oh, don't misunderstand me, said Monte Cristo. I like everybody in the way that God ordered us to love our neighbours, that is, in Christian charity. I only bestow true hatred on certain people. But, to get back to Franz d'Épinay, he is coming home, you say? Yes, on the instructions of Monsieur de Villefort, who is as mad keen to marry off Mademoiselle Valentine, apparently, as Monsieur Danglars is to marry off Mademoiselle Eugène. It really does appear that being the father of grown-up girls is one of the most exhausting states. As far as I can see, their temperature soars and their pulses beat 90 to the minute until they have disposed of them. But Monsieur d'Épinay is not like you. He is reconciled to his fate.
More than that, he takes it seriously. He puts on white ties and is already talking about his family, and he holds the Villefors in high esteem.
Deservedly, no doubt.
I think so. Monsieur de Villefort has always been considered a strict but just man.
At last, said Monte Cristo, here is someone at least whom you do not treat like poor Monsieur Danglars.
Perhaps that's because I'm not obliged to marry his daughter, Albert said, laughing.
Really, my dear sir, said Monte Cristo, you are disgustingly smug.
I? Smug?
Yes, you. Have a cigar.
Thank you. So why am I smug?
Because here you are, shielding yourself and struggling not to marry Mademoiselle Danglars. Why not just let things take their course, and perhaps you won't be the first to take back your word.
What?
Albert said, gawping. Ah, yes, Monsieur le Vicomte. What do you think of that? They won't tie you down by force, but... Seriously, Monte Cristo said, in a different tone of voice. Do you want to break it off?
I'd give 100,000 francs if I could.
Well, you'll be happy to know that Monsieur Danglars is prepared to give twice that amount to achieve the same end.
What happiness! Can it be true?
Albert exclaimed, but was unable, in spite of that, to prevent a faint cloud from passing across his brow.
My dear Count, does Monsieur Danglars have some reason for that?
How typical that is, you proud and self-absorbed creature. This is indeed the man who enjoys taking an axe to the self-esteem of others, but cries out when a needle touches his own.
No. I just think that Monsieur Danglars
should be delighted to have you as a son-in-law, isn't that it? Well now, Monsieur Danglars is a man of poor taste, as we all know, and he is still more delighted by someone else.
Who is that?
I don't know. Look carefully, catch every hint as it goes past, and profit by what you learn.
Good, I understand. Listen,
my mother...
No, not my mother, I'm wrong. My father had the idea of giving a ball.
A ball at this time of year?
Summer balls are in fashion.
Even if they weren't, the Countess would only have to wish it and they would become so.
Not bad. You know these are thoroughbred events. People who stay in Paris in July are real Parisians. Would you be good enough to invite Monsieur Cavalcanti?
When will this ball take place?
On Saturday.
The elder Cavalcanti will have left by then.
But not the son, so perhaps you could bring the younger Cavalcanti?
Listen, Viscount, I don't know him.
You don't know him?
No, I met him for the first time 3 or 4 days ago, and I can't answer for him at all.
But you invite him here?
That's different. He was recommended to me by a good abbé, who might have been mistaken himself. Invite him indirectly, certainly, but don't ask me to introduce him to you. If he was later to marry Mademoiselle Danglars, you would accuse me of manipulation, and you would have a bone to pick with me. In any case, I'm not sure that I'll go myself.
Go where?
To your ball.
Why on earth not?
First of all, you haven't invited me yet.
I came especially to deliver the invitation.
That's too kind, but suppose I have another engagement. I have only to tell you one thing, and I think you will be good enough to forego any prior engagement.
What is that? My mother begs you to come.
The Comtesse de Morcerf, Monte Cristo said with a shudder.
I warn you, Count, Madame de Morcerf speaks to me quite freely, and if you do not feel those sympathetic fibres I mentioned just now crackling inside you, that means you are entirely devoid of them, because you were our only subject of conversation in the past 4 days.
I was? I am overwhelmed.
Listen, this is a privilege of your profession.
When one is a living enigma. Ah, so I'm also an enigma for your mother. Quite honestly, I should have thought her too sensible to indulge in such flights of fancy.
An enigma, my dear Count, an enigma for everyone, my mother as well as the rest. As long as the mystery has been recognized but not solved, you will remain an enigma. Don't worry. My mother is only puzzled by the fact that you seem so young. I think underneath that whereas Countess G thinks you are Lord Ruthven, my mother takes you for Caligostro or the Comte de Saint-Germain. The first time you meet Madame de Morcerf, you must confirm her in that impression. It shouldn't be difficult. You have the wit of one and the philosopher's stone of the other.
Thank you for warning me, the Count said, smiling. I shall try to live up to all expectations. So you will come on Saturday? Since Madame de Morcerf requests my company. You are charming. And Monsieur Danglars?
Oh, he's already had a triple invitation. My father looked after that. We shall also try to have the great D'Aguesseau, Monsieur de Villefort, but I don't expect we shall succeed.
One must never give up hope, the proverb says.
Do you dance, my dear Count?
Do I dance?
Yes, you. Why not?
Well, I suppose while one is still under 40, but no, I don't dance. However, I like to watch others. Does Madame de Morcerf dance?
No, never. You can talk. She so much wants to talk to you.
Really?
I give you my word. And I must tell you, you are the first man about whom my mother has shown such curiosity.
Albert took his hat and got up. The Count accompanied him to the door. Stopping at the top of the steps, he said,
I was wrong about one thing.
What was that?
It was indiscreet of me to tell you about Monsieur Danglars.
On the contrary, please keep telling me. Talk about him as much as you like, as long as the message remains the same.
Well, you make me...
Oh, it was the wrong way round.
On the contrary, please keep telling me. Talk about him as much as you like, as long as the message remains the same.
Well, you make me feel better about it. So, when is Monsieur d'Épinay arriving back?
In 5 or 6 days at the latest.
And when is he getting married?
As soon as Monsieur and Madame de Saint-Méran are here.
When he gets to Paris, bring him to see me. Even though you say that I don't like him, I assure you I shall be happy to see him.
Very well, my lord. Your orders shall be carried out.
Au revoir.
Until Saturday, at least. It's agreed?
Of course, I've given my word. The Count watched and waved. Then, when Albert had got into his phaeton, he turned around and saw Bertuccio behind him. Well? He asked. She went to the law courts, the steward answered. Did she stay long? An hour and a half. Then returned home, without stopping. Very good, said the Count. And now, my dear Monsieur Bertuccio, if I have a piece of advice for you, it is to go to Normandy and see if you can't find the little estate I mentioned. Bertuccio bowed, and the Count's command being entirely coincidental with his own wishes, left that very evening. And I think there we shall take a break. I might just do possibly one chapter after the break, because my voice is feeling a little bit hoarse. And yes, sorry if anyone heard any sort of half snores. Sam fell asleep. But also, yes, hello Lynn. I didn't see you appear. Thank you for listening. But yes, we shall hop to a break, and we will be back in about 5 minutes. So bye for now. nice break. I'm getting a bit warm. Shedding layers. And, oh, hi, Salad. I didn't see you there. Hope you are well. Was it new music? The break music is... well, it was new a little while ago because we, for some reason, kept on getting copyright struck for something that very much wasn't the recording of the thing that it was, because it just isn't. And also the composer has been dead for many years. So we thought we'd just, because it was muting bits of the VOD, so we decided to just like change the music to make life easier. And thank you, thanks, Lynn. That's we are aware of trying to take care of our voices, I particularly have had quite a voice heavy couple of weeks. I've been singing quite a bit, so don't worry, I will be, and we both will be making sure that we don't strain our voices and stuff. This might be a ever so slightly shorter stream, just because of that. Let me have a look how many pages we have to read. Stop doing the accent, Lucy. Please stop doing the accent, Lucy. We might get through one chapter, we might get through two. We shall have to see. I hope everybody has had a nice break, and is adequately fed and watered and comfy and chill and stuff. I made myself a tea, which I feel is going to be a bit of a mistake because I'm probably going to overheat. But we shall see how that goes. I guess without further ado, let us continue with what chapter are we on now? Ooh, we're on a nice chapter. I'm going to say nice before I say it, otherwise it'll be very unprofessional. Nice. Chapter 69. Information. Monsieur de Villefort kept his word to Madame Danglars, and most of all to himself, by trying to find out how the Count of Monte Cristo could have learnt the story of the house in Auteuil. That same day he wrote to a certain Monsieur de Beauville, who, after once being an inspector of prisons, had been transferred at a higher rank to the detective branch of the police, inquiring whether he could provide the necessary information. Beauville asked for 2 days to hunt down the best sources. When the 2 days were up, Monsieur de Villefort received the following note. The person described as the Count of Monte Cristo is known particularly to Lord Wilmore, a rich foreigner and an occasional visitor to Paris, who is here at the moment, and to Abbé Busoni, a Sicilian priest who is highly reputed in the East, where he accomplished many good works. Monsieur de Villefort replied, ordering that the most precise information should be obtained at once on these 2 persons. By the next evening, his orders had been carried out, and he received the following news. The abbé was only in Paris for 1 month. He lived behind the church of Saint-Sulpice in a little house consisting of a single story above the ground floor, the entire accommodation, of which he was the sole tenant, being made up of 4 rooms altogether, 2 up and 2 down. The 2 downstairs rooms consisted of a dining room with a table, 2 chairs and a walnut sideboard, and a drawing room, painted white, with no ornaments, no carpet and no clock. It could be seen that, for himself, the abbé was content with the bare necessities. Admittedly, he preferred to live in the first-floor living-room, which was entirely furnished with theological texts and parchments in which, according to his valet, he was accustomed to bury himself for months on end, making this less a living-room than a library. The valet examined visitors through a kind of Judas window. If their faces were unknown or unpleasing to him, he would tell them that Monsieur l'Abbé was not in Paris. Most were satisfied with this reply, knowing that the abbé often travelled and sometimes spent long periods abroad. In any case, whether or not he was at home, whether he was in Paris or in Cairo, the abbé always gave alms, so that the little window in his door served as a passage for the gifts that the valet constantly distributed in his master's name. The other room, close to the library, was a bedroom. The furnishings here were entirely made up of a bed with no curtains, 4 armchairs, and a sofa covered in yellow Utrecht velvet, together with a prie-dieu. As for Lord Wilmore, he lived in the Rue Fontaine Saint-Georges, He was one of those touring Englishmen who spend all their inheritance on travel. He rented the apartment, furnished, where he lived, but spent only 2 or 3 hours a day there and slept there rarely. One of his eccentricities was that he refused to speak French, even though it was reported that he could write the language very correctly. The day after the Crown Prosecutor received this precious information, a man, getting down from his carriage at the corner of the Rue Férou, went and knocked on a door painted in olive green and asked for Abbé Busoni. "Monsieur l'Abbé went out early this morning," said the valet. "I cannot be satisfied by that answer," the visitor said, "for I come on behalf of a person to whom everyone is at home. But kindly give Abbé Busoni—" "I told you already he is not here," the valet repeated. "Then when he gets back, give him this card and this sealed paper. Will the abbé be at home this evening at 8? "Undoubtedly, monsieur, unless he is working, in which case it is as if he was out." "So I shall come back this evening at the time we mentioned," the visitor said, then went away. That evening, at the appointed hour, the same man returned in the same carriage, which this time, instead of stopping on the corner of the Rue Férou, drew up in front of the green door. He knocked. It was opened, and he went in. From the valet's obsequious behaviour, he realised that his letter had had the desired effect. "Is Monsieur l'Abbé at home?" "Yes, he is working in his library, but he is expecting you, sir." The stranger climbed a fairly rough staircase. Sitting behind a table, the whole surface of which was flooded in the light concentrated on it by a huge lampshade, while the rest of the apartment was in shadow, he saw the abbé, in ecclesiastical dress, his head hooded in one of those hoods with which medieval scholars used to cover their skulls. "Do I have the honour of speaking to Monsieur Busoni?" the visitor asked. "Yes, monsieur," the abbé replied. "And you are the person sent to me by Monsieur de Beauville, former inspector of prisons, on behalf of the prefect of police?" "Precisely, monsieur." "One of those agents appointed to look after security in Paris?" "Yes, monsieur," the stranger replied, with a momentary hesitation and, above all, a blush. The abbé adjusted the large glasses that covered not only his eyes but also his temples, and sitting down again, he motioned to the visitor to do likewise. "I am listening," he said, in a marked Italian accent. "The mission I have to accomplish, monsieur," the visitor resumed, weighing each word as though finding it difficult to get it out, "is a confidential mission, both for the person carrying it out and for the one who will assist him in his inquiries." The abbé bowed his head. "Yes," the stranger continued, "your probity, monsieur l'abbé, is so well known to the prefect of police that, as a magistrate, he would like to know something touching that same public safety in the name of which I have been sent to you. Consequently, Monsieur l'Abbé, we hope that neither ties of friendship nor any other human considerations will induce you to hide the truth from the eyes of the law." "Monsieur, as long as whatever you wish to know does not affect any scruple of my conscience. I am a priest, and the secrets of the confessional, for example, must remain between me and God's justice, not between me and a human justice." "Oh, Monsieur l'Abbé, you may be quite reassured on that," said the stranger. "In any case, we shall ensure that your conscience is protected." At this, the abbé leant on his side of the lampshade, raising it on the opposite side so that it lit fully the face of the stranger, while leaving his own still in shadow. "I beg your pardon, father," the other man said. "This light is terribly tiring for my eyes." The abbé lowered the green shade and said, "Now, monsieur, I am listening. Speak." "I am coming to the point. Do you know the Count of Monte Cristo?" "I suppose you are speaking of Monsieur Zaccone." "Zaccone? So he's not called Monte Cristo?" "Monte Cristo is the name of an island, or rather of a rock, not of a family." "Very well, let's not argue about words. So, since Monsieur de Monte Cristo and Monsieur Zaccone are the same man, Absolutely the same. Then let us talk about Monsieur Zaccone. Agreed. I asked if you knew him. Very well. Who is he? The son of a rich shipowner in Malta. Yes, I know that's what they say, but as you must realize, the police cannot be satisfied with mere hearsay. And yet, the abbé said with a very pleasant smile, when hearsay is the truth, everyone must be satisfied the police as well as the rest. But are you sure of what you are saying? What? Am I sure? Please understand me, monsieur. I do not in any way question your good faith. I am merely asking if you are sure. Come now. I knew Monsieur Zaccone, his father. Ah! And while I was still a child, I played a dozen games with his son in their shipyards. But this title, Count, that can be bought, you know. In Italy? Everywhere. But this wealth which, still according to rumour, is immense. Ah, that, said the abbé. Immense is the word. You know him. How much do you think he owns? Oh, an income of at least 150 to 200,000 livres. That's reasonable, the visitor said. There was talk of 3 or 4 million. An income of 200,000 livres, monsieur, adds up to a capital of just 4 million. But there was talk of an income of 3 or 4 million. Oh, it's impossible to believe that. Do you know his island of Monte Cristo? Of course. Anyone who has come from Palermo, Naples, or Rome to France by sea knows it, since he will have sailed past it and seen it as he went. They say it's an enchanted spot. It's a rock. Why should the Count buy a rock? Precisely in order to be a Count. In Italy, to be a Count, you still need a country. A county. You have doubtless heard of Monsieur Zaccone's youthful adventures. The father's? No, the son's. Ah, this is where I am less certain, because I lost touch with my young friend. Did he fight in the war? I think he served in it. In what force? In the navy. Aren't you his confessor? No, monsieur, I think he is a Lutheran. How is that, a Lutheran? I say I think so. I couldn't swear to it. In any case, I thought there was freedom of worship now in France. Indeed there is, and we are not concerned with his beliefs at this moment, but with his actions. In the name of the prefect of police, I request you to tell me whatever you know. He is reputed to be a very charitable man. Our Holy Father the Pope made him a Knight of Christ, a favour that he hardly ever grants except to princes, for his outstanding services to Christians in the East. He has 5 or 6 ribbons acquired for services to princes or states. Does he wear them? No, but he is proud of them nonetheless. He says that he prefers awards given to benefactors of mankind to those given to destroyers of men. Do you mean he's a Quaker? That's right, a Quaker, apart from the broad-brimmed hat and brown coat, of course. Does he have any friends, as far as you know? Yes, everyone who knows him is his friend. And any enemies, then? Only one. Who is that? Lord Wilmore. Where can I find him? He is in Paris at this very moment. Can he give me any information? Yes, very valuable. He was in India at the same time as Zaccone. Do you know where he lives? Somewhere in the Chaussée d'Antin. I am not sure of the street or the number of the house. Are you on bad terms with this Englishman? I like Zaccone and he detests him, so for that reason we do not get along. Abbe, do you think that the Count of Monte Cristo has ever been to France before the journey that has brought him to Paris? Oh, as far as that is concerned, I do know something to the point. No, monsieur, he has never been here, because 6 months ago he asked me for the information he needed, and I, since I did not know precisely when I should be returning to Paris myself, I sent him to see Monsieur Cavalcanti. Andrea? No, Bartolomeo, the father. Very well, monsieur. I have only one more thing to ask you, and I command you in the name of honour, humanity, and religion to answer me without any attempt at concealment. Ask your question. Do you know for what purpose the Count of Monte Cristo bought a house in Auteuil? Indeed I do, he told me. So why? With the idea of turning it into an asylum for lunatics on the model of the one set up in Palermo by Baron di Pisani. Do you know that asylum? Only by reputation, Monsieur l'Abbé. It is a wonderful institution. At this the abbé got up, like a man intimating to his visitor that he would not be sorry to resume his interrupted work. The other did the same, either because he understood what the abbé wanted, or because he had run out of questions. The abbé accompanied him to the door. "You give generously in alms," the visitor said, "and even though they say you are rich, I would like to offer you something for the poor. Would you accept my gift?" "Thank you, monsieur, but I boast of only one thing in the world, which is that all the good I do comes from me alone." "Yes. My resolve is unwavering, but seek, monsieur, and you will find. Alas, every rich man has more than enough of poverty to pass by on his road through life." The abbé bowed once more as he opened the door, and the stranger returned the compliment and left. His carriage took him immediately to Monsieur de Villefort's, and an hour later it drove out again, this time towards the Rue Fontaine-Saint-Georges. It stopped by number 5, which was the address of Lord Wilmore. The stranger had written to Lord Wilmore to request a meeting, which had been fixed for 10 o'clock. As the prefect of police's envoy arrived at 10 to 10, he was told that Lord Wilmore, who was the soul of punctuality, had not yet returned, but that he would do so on the stroke of 10. The visitor waited in the drawing-room. There was nothing remarkable about this room, which was like any other in furnished lodgings. A mantelpiece with 2 modern Sèvres vases, a clock with Cupid drawing his bow, and a mirror in 2 sections. Engravings on each side of the mirror, one showing Homer carrying his guide, the other Belisarius begging alms. Wallpaper, grey on grey. A sofa upholstered in red and printed in black. This was Lord Wilmore's drawing-room. It was lit by 2 lamps with shades of frosted glass that gave only a feeble light, as if deliberately designed not to strain the tired eyes of the prefect's emissary. After he had waited 10 minutes, the clock struck 10, and on the 5th stroke the door opened and Lord Wilmore appeared. He was a man of more than average height, with thin reddish side whiskers, a pale complexion and greying blonde hair. He was dressed with typically English eccentricity. That is to say, he wore a blue coat with gold buttons and a high piqué collar, of the kind worn in 1811, with a waistcoat of white cashmere and nankeen breeches, 3 inches too short, restrained by straps under the feet from mounting up to his knees. His first words on entering were, "You know, monsieur, that I do not speak French." "I certainly know that you do not like to speak our language," the policeman said. "But you may speak it," Lord Wilmore continued, "for though I do not speak, I can understand." "And I speak English well enough," said the visitor, changing to that language, "for us to hold a conversation. So you may feel at ease, monsieur." "Wah!" Lord Wilmore exclaimed, with an intonation that only a pure-blooded Englishman can achieve. The other man gave him his letter of introduction, which was perused with peculiarly British phlegm. Then, when he had finished, he said in English, "Yes, I quite understand." So the visitor began his inquiries. The questions were roughly the same as those that had been asked of Abbé Busoni, but since Lord Wilmore, an enemy of the Count of Monte Cristo, did not show the same discretion as the abbé, his answers were much fuller. He described the Count's youth, saying that as a boy of 10 he had entered into the service of one of those Indian princelings who make war against the English, This is where he and Lord Wilmore met for the first time and fought one another. In the course of the war, Zaccone was taken prisoner, sent to England and put in the hulks, from which he escaped by jumping into the water. This was the start of his journeys, his duels, his love affairs. When the Greeks rebelled, he fought for them against the Turks and, while in their service, discovered a silver mine in the mountains of Thessaly, about which he was careful to tell no one. When the Greek government was consolidated after the Battle of Navarino, he asked King Otto for a license to exploit the mine, which was granted. Hence the vast fortune which, according to Lord Wilmore, might yield an income of 2 million, but which would at the same time dry up overnight, if the mine itself were to do so. "But do you know why he has come to France?" the visitor asked. "He wishes to speculate on the railways," said Lord Wilmore, "and, being a skilled chemist and no less distinguished physicist, he has invented a new form of telegraph which he is in the process of developing." "Roughly how much does he spend a year?" the policeman asked. "Oh, 500,000 or 600,000 francs at the most," said Lord Wilmore. "He's a miser." It was clear that the Englishman was inspired by hatred, and, not finding anything else to say against the Count, he reproached him with avarice. "Do you know anything about his house in Auteuil?" "Yes, indeed." "What? Do you mean his reason for buying it?" "Yes." "Well, the Count is a speculator who will certainly ruin himself with experiments and wild dreams. He claims that in Auteuil, close to the house which he had just bought, there is a stream of mineral water which can rival those of Bagnères, Luchon, and Cotter. He wants to make his house into what the Germans call a bathhouse, and has already dug over the whole of his garden 2 or 3 times to discover this famous spring. Since he has been able to find nothing, you will shortly see him buy all the houses around his own. Since there is no love lost between us, I hope that his railways, his electric telegraph, and his mineral waters will ruin him. I shall enjoy his discomfiture, which is bound to arrive sooner or later." "And why do you dislike him?" "Because once, when he was in England, he seduced the wife of one of my friends." "So why not try to be revenged on him?" "I have already fought the Count 3 times, the Englishman said. "The first time with pistols, the second with foils, and the third with sabres." "What was the result of these duels?" "The first time he broke my arm, the second he ran me through the lung, and the third he gave me this wound." The Englishman turned down the shirt collar that reached up to his ears and revealed a scar, the redness of which showed that it must have been made recently. "So I greatly resent him," the Englishman said. "Naturally, he will die by no hand except mine." "But it seems to me that you are doing nothing to kill him." "Hah!" the Englishman said. "Every day I go to the shooting range, and every other day Rizier comes here." This was all that the visitor wished to know, or rather all that the Englishman appeared able to tell him. The agent got up and left, after taking leave of Lord Wilmore, who returned his bow with characteristically English stiffness and politeness. For his part, Lord Wilmore, on hearing the street door shut, went back into his bedroom, and, in a trice, lost his blonde hair, his red sideboards, his false jaw, and his scar, to resume the black hair, dark colouring, and pearly teeth of the Count of Monte Cristo. And, as it happened, it was Monsieur de Villefort himself, and not an emissary of the prefect of police, who returned to Monsieur de Villefort's house. The Crown Prosecutor was a little easier in his mind after these 2 visits. He had not learnt anything reassuring from them, but neither had he learnt anything disturbing. As a result, for the first time since the dinner in Auteuil, he slept quite calmly the following night.